Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Ask Me Anything about my travel series. So it's Tuesday. I hope everyone had a good Labor Day weekend. I know I did. I was just relaxing with my parents down in Cincinnati because I didn't get to do that for a very long time. So I did nothing, and I hope that your weekend was just as good as mine. So getting back into it, I had a very good question from Steve Huckabee. Once again, another awesome question about what limited American views do, or what views, misconceptions do Americans have about the world. And I'll start by prefacing the question with the fact that we're not as bad as we think we are. I think we put a lot of burden on ourselves, especially. I don't think many of us have done the long-term travel, say like young Germans. Young Germans is almost a rite of passage to go out and travel. But even then, I think we should cut ourselves a little bit of slack because we're intelligent, and there's the ugly American stereotype where we sort of push our views on other people. But in the modern day, we really aren't that bad. So take these with a grain of salt, of course. And this is a huge topic. We can talk more about certain aspects that we do get wrong or common misconceptions about the world. But I have three big ones that I hear a lot over and over and over again that, I hope to clear up and maybe help people curb some fears about travel and what travel can mean and the dangers of travel, quote unquote dangers of travel. So the first misconception that I see a lot with Americans traveling abroad is that America is the most advanced country in the world. And unfortunately, I just don't think that's true. So I guess to define advanced, I would say in a societal factor, the way we operate, the way we use our resources, the efficiency of how everything works. We think that we're the most efficient and the most advanced, but I disagree. I think Europe is ahead of us in that way, especially with their public transport and just the way that they move. And yeah, they're just the resources that Europe has at its disposal. It's a little bit more than us. And another misconception about us thinking about the third world, and remember from our last video, the third world actually just means that it wasn't the NATO pact or the Soviet bloc of countries, it's just everyone else. So that can be a wide range from Singapore to Laos to the beginning countries in Africa to anywhere. So I think we don't realize that the world is actually way more developed than we think it is. This was actually a shock for me going to Southeast Asia and some African countries. The world is really developed, and they're not that far behind. It's really more of the governments and systems in place that hold people back compared to people aren't living in huts anymore all around the world. Even African countries, there's big cities, big booming cities with thriving economies, and that is something that I definitely had before I left, and I see a lot of people have, is that we're the most advanced, we're the top of the food chain, and then everyone else, these third world countries, they're just living in huts and shacks and everything else. I'm not saying that that doesn't exist, but I think it exists far less than people think it does. So I wouldn't be afraid to try out some countries that maybe push your limits of what you think a developing country is. And I'll bet that you'd be surprised once you got there that yeah, it's fine. It's fine. People have running water. They have amenities. This isn't just bare land with people living in tents. That's very, very rare, and that's very, very rare in common day. So that's number one. Is yeah, the world's pretty developed. You'll be all right. And then that kind of leads into the second one, is that the world is genuinely unsafe. And I actually had a really good conversation with someone back home about this, because I really think a lot of people believe the world and the unknown is really unsafe. And yeah, there's a certain point where we fear the unknown, but in general, I actually felt extremely safe in every single country. I went developing country, third world country, second world country, first world country. it sure there's certain things that you have to be aware of and use common sense, but I never really found myself in a situation that my life was on the line or something really terrible was about to happen. The world is genuinely safe. People generally are good, in my opinion. And as long as you use common sense when you're traveling, then yeah, you can really avoid most of the unsafe situations that most travelers fear of. And this one, I really hope people go and I guess find the courage to take that first trip, because you really, to break that stereotype, do need to go. It's really hard to break that perception of the world unless your feet do go on the ground, and then you can get a real feel of what it's like to be in a place. And I think people will be extremely surprised at just how safe and wonderful people are in the world. So uh, the stereotype that the world is unsafe and that branching out of your shell, you're really putting yourself at risk, I really don't think that's true, especially in the modern day. Now, once again, it depends on where you go, but in most cases, like the point before, a lot of the world is developed. There's doctors around. There's things that can help you. The modern world has a ton of resources, and most countries have these resources for you to use on all your wonderful vacations, trips, travel, long-term travels, whatever you need. Which kind of brings me up to the third point, and I see this a lot. I think this is where the ugly American stereotype comes from. It's where people go in with this expectation that people live like us and want to live like us. And so for people that don't know, the ugly American stereotype, which is once again just a stereotype, is when you go into a country or a situation and you have expectations that it's going to be the life that you live back home. And when you don't get that life back home, then you start to lash out at the people around you, at the clerks of the hotel, at really anybody, and start to demand the same quality of life that you have back home. And we really do have to realize that not only are there so many different ways to live life, but people may really not want to live our style of life and want to live their style of life. And since we are in their home, we have to be really respectful of that. And I think a really good example of that is I had met a couple Americans in Europe, and in certain places of Europe, actually a lot of places in Europe, credit cards are primarily not used. It's usually just cash and just euros. And for us, maybe that can be a little bit inconvenient because we swipe our credit cards, we do our transactions very quickly, and we leave. Well, in a German grocery store, you can usually find a big line at the counter where people are counting pennies and coins to get the exact match and pretty much use every cent. And that's just how it is. You can take the time to find your pennies. There's no rush to get people through. And the people that I met were really complaining about that. And even someone in line was starting to make sort of a fuss about how slow the line was taking. And that's really the dangerous ground, because people in Germany really value the transactions in cash and believe that the credit cards actually hurt their finances, which there's a lot of evidence to say that's true. So who are we to tell them that's how we're supposed to live? And I'm trying to think of another example. Even just in Greece or some of the Mediterranean countries, there's a stereotype of them being lazy. And of course, down in the Mediterranean, when it's in the middle of the day and you're supposed to be working, sometimes it's really freaking hot. So that's where the siesta has come from, because outdoor workers, it's almost impossible to work in plus 100-degree weather. So they take a little siesta. But for us, maybe that seems lazy. And we do have a more work-involved, work-centric lifestyle here in the US. And a lot of people don't really like that as much. And who are we to judge them and call them lazy when it's their home and they get to decide what they want to work for and how hard they want to. So those are just a couple of examples. I'll stop there for the sake of time, because we go about this topic forever. And once again, I don't think we're nearly as bad as people in the stereotypes give us credit for. Of course, there are those 2 standard deviations away from the mean that do have a really set the stereotype. But as long as you go in with an open mind, and of course these 3 topics, really be aware of them, that the world is way more advanced than we think it is, and we are not the top of the food chain when it comes to societal advancement. The world is not as unsafe as you think it is. Just use common sense. Know where you are, what you're doing, just like any American city, and you'll be just fine. The world is full of wonderful people, and doesn't have as many bad people as we think. And then 3, that people want to live like us, because there's a lot of people out there that don't want to live like us and still have happy, wonderful, productive lives. So those are the 3 misconceptions that I really came across a lot in my travels, both with American tourists and people talking to people back home. And that's it. I hope you have a wonderful Tuesday. If you have any other questions about this topic or any other topic, just write comments in the section below. I'll get to all of them as soon as I can. I'll keep pumping out the videos. And thanks for listening, guys. This is actually really helping me talk about this stuff, because it is still very, very strange being back home. And I mean, I love it here, of course, but this is so therapeutic to be able to talk and have questions to answer and try to help you or anyone else travel, do the dream, make any of their dreams happen, I guess. So thank you for all of the support, and check out the YouTube channel for all of the other videos if you missed any. And yeah, that's it. Have a great Tuesday. Have a great short week, and enjoy the last of summer while it's still around. So enjoy, guys, and I'll see you later.